But nobody came. The fire roared in the stove, and the rain beat against the windows. Then came the final blow. I took the heavy typescripts and notebook drafts of the novel out of the desk drawer and started to burn them. It's a fiendishly difficult thing to do because paper that has been written on doesn't burn easily. I broke my nails tearing the notebooks apart. Then I stood the pages upright between the logs and jabbed at them with the poker. At times the ashes would get the best of me and choke out the fire, but I fought back, and the novel, despite stubborn resistance, was perishing. Familiar words flashed before me, and a yellowness crept relentlessly up the pages. But you could still make out the words. They disappeared only when the paper turned black and I beat them viciously with the poker. It was then that someone began scratching softly at the window. My heart gave a leap. I hurled the last notebook into the flames and rushed to the open door. Brick steps led up from the basement to the door into the yard. I stumbled up to the door and asked quietly, "Who's there?" And a voice, her voice, answered me. "It's me." I don't remember how I managed the key and chain. The minute she stepped inside, she fell against me, completely soaked, shivering, with wet cheeks and tousled hair. The only thing I could say was, "Is it you?" And then my voice broke, and we ran downstairs. She left her coat in the hall, and we went quickly into the first room. She let out a soft cry, and with her bare hands threw what was left in the stove onto the floor, a packet of sheets burning on the bottom. Smoke immediately filled the room. I stamped out the flames, and she threw herself on the couch and started to cry convulsively and uncontrollably. When she calmed down, I said, "I came to hate that novel, and I'm afraid. I'm sick. I'm terrified." She got up and started to speak. "My God, you are sick. Why did you do it? Why?" "I'll save you. What's this all about?" I saw her eyes swollen from smoke and tears, and I felt her cold hands stroking my forehead. I'll cure you, she murmured, clutching me by the shoulders. "You'll reconstruct it. Why, oh why didn't I keep a copy myself?" She bared her teeth in fury and said something else that I couldn't make out. Then, with her lips pursed, she started gathering and sorting the burnt pages. It was a chapter from the middle of the novel. I don't remember which. She stacked the pages neatly, wrapped them in paper, and tied them with a ribbon. All her movements showed decisiveness and self-control. She asked for some wine, and after drinking it began to speak more calmly. "This is what we get for lying," she said. "And I don't want to lie anymore. I'd stay with you right now, but that's not the way I want to do it. I don't want to leave him with the memory of my running off at night. He never did me any harm. He was called out suddenly. There was a fire at his factory, but he'll be back soon. I'll tell him everything in the morning. I'll tell him that I love someone else, and then I'll come back to you forever. Tell me, though, perhaps that isn't what you want?" "My poor thing, my poor dear," I said to her. "I won't let you do that. Things will go badly for me, and I don't want you to perish with me." "Is that the only reason?" she asked, drawing her eyes close to mine. "The only one." She became terribly animated, pressed herself against me, wrapped her arms around my neck, and said, "I will perish with you, and I'll be back with you in the morning." The last thing that I remember in my life is the strip of light coming from the entryway, and in that light a loosened curl, her beret, and her eyes full of determination. I also remember a black silhouette in the outer doorway and a white package. "I'd see you home, but I don't have the strength to come back here alone, I'm afraid." "Don't be afraid. Just be patient for a few hours. I'll be back with you in the morning." Those were her last words in my life. "Shh!" The sick man interrupted himself suddenly and raised his finger. This moonlit night is restless. He disappeared out onto the balcony. Yvonne heard the sound of wheels in the corridor and a faint cry or sob. When everything had quieted down, the guest came back and told Yvonne that room 120 had a new occupant. Someone had been brought in who kept asking to have his head returned. An anxious silence passed between the interlocutors. But once they calmed down, they returned to the story that had been interrupted. The guest was about to open his mouth, but the night was indeed a restless one. Voices could still be heard in the corridor, and the guest whispered in Yvonne's ear so quietly that what he was saying was heard only by the poet, with the exception of the opening sentence. 15 minutes after she left me, there was a knock at the window. What the sick man was whispering into Yvonne's ear obviously made the sick man very upset. Convulsive spasms kept contorting his face. Fear and fury swam and raged in his eyes. The storyteller pointed toward the moon, which had long since disappeared from the balcony. Only after all the outside noises ceased did the guest move away from Yvonne and start speaking a little more loudly. Yes, so there I was in my yard in the middle of January at night, wearing the same coat, but with the buttons torn off, shivering from the cold. Behind me were snowdrifts covering the lilac bushes. And in front of me and down below, my feebly lit, blind-covered windows. I leaned over and listened at the first window. A phonograph was playing inside my apartment. That was all I could hear, and I couldn't see anything. After standing there for a while, I went out through the gate into the lane. The snow was falling heavily. A dog dashed under my feet and frightened me. And I ran across the street to get away from it. The cold and the fear, which had become my constant companion, had brought me to the breaking point. I had nowhere to go. And the simplest thing for me to do, of course, would have been to throw myself under one of the streetcars that passed along the main street at the end of my lane. I could see those light-filled, iced-covered boxes in the distance and could hear the ghastly grating sound that they made on the frost and ice. But my dear neighbor, the whole point was that fear had invaded every cell in my body, and I was as afraid of the streetcar as I had been of the dog. Yes, my illness is the worst in the building, I assure you. But you could have let her know, said Yvonne, sympathizing with the poor patient. Besides, didn't she have your money? Naturally, she kept it, didn't she? Don't worry, of course she kept it. But you don't seem to understand me. Either that, or I've lost the facility I once had for describing things. However, I don't miss it very much, since I have no further use for it. If I had let her know, the guest stared reverently into the darkness of the night. The letter she received would have come from an insane asylum. How can you send letters with an address like that? A mental patient? Surely you're joking, my friend. Make her unhappy? No, I'm not capable of that. Yvonne could offer no objection to that, but he sympathized with his guest in silence and felt compassion for him, and the latter, feeling the pain of his memories, nodded his black-capped head and said, Poor woman, but I'm hoping that she's forgotten me. But you may get well, said Yvonne timidly. I'm incurable, the guest replied calmly. When Stravinsky says that he'll bring me back to life, I don't believe him. He's humane and simply wants to comfort me. I don't deny, by the way, that I'm much better now. But where was I? Oh yes, the ice and cold, the speeding streetcars. I knew that this clinic had already opened, and I set out for it on foot across the whole city. What madness! I would certainly have frozen to death when I got outside the city if a chance occurrence hadn't saved me. A truck had broken down about 4 kilometers outside the city, and I went over to speak to the driver. To my surprise, he took pity on me. He was on his way here. and he gave me a lift. The worst thing that happened to me was that I got frostbite on the toes of my left foot. But they fixed that, and this is my 4th month here, and I don't find it so bad here. Not bad at all. One really shouldn't make big plans for oneself, dear neighbor. Take me, for example. I wanted to travel around the globe. Well, it turned out that wasn't meant to be. I can see only an insignificant little piece of it. I don't think it's the best piece of it either, but as I said, it's not so bad. Summer will be here soon, and the balcony will be covered with ivy, just as Praskovia Fyodorovna promises. Having her keys has given me new possibilities. There will be a moon at night. It's gone. The air is fresher. It's getting on past midnight. It's time for me to go. Tell me, asked Ivan, what happened next to Yeshua and Pilate? Please, I want to know. Oh, no, the guest answered, twitching painfully. I can't think of my novel without a shudder. Your friend from Patriarch's Ponds could have done it better than I. Thanks for the conversation. Goodbye. And before Ivan could realize what was happening, the window grill shut softly, and the guest was gone.